Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of my rock review. Before I start, I want to give my rest in peace to the one, the only, the legendary Prodigy of Mobb Deep. Died today of sickle cell. I was like, when I first heard, I've heard it on Facebook. My homeboy put on a post. I was like, no, not Prodigy. It was just crazy because I had they just released the video for AZ's new single Come Through with Waquan and Prodigy about a couple of days ago, and he just died. I was like, Prodigy? No, man. Like, if you guys don't know him, I've reviewed Mobb Deep's The Infamous and Hell on Earth, both classic albums. In my opinion, their best albums. That and Murder Music are my favorite albums from them. And one thing I've always loved about Prodigy was just the way his lyricism was just so ahead of his time, basically, and shit like that. And in my opinion, I feel like The Infamous really put Queensbridge hip hop on the map. Now, don't get me wrong. Nas, I'm not discrediting like Illmatic and like the Cooley raps and everything like that, but The Infamous was really the Queensbridge breakthrough, if you ask me. And yeah, shout out to his family, shout out to Havoc, Queensbridge. You guys lost a legend, basically. Alright, so basically, album I'm about to review tonight. Led Zeppelin's 7th studio album, Presence, released in 1976 on their label Swan Song. It came out with one single, Candy Store Rock. Jimmy Page produced this. I reviewed all the albums up to Physical Graffiti. And yeah. And here I go. Of course, I don't have the album. I've been meaning to get it. That's why I haven't been reviewing a lot of Led Zeppelin. I've been meaning to get the last two albums. But every time I go to stores, they're always overpricing it. Like, I saw Presses in stores for like $24. And In Through the Outdoor was like about 22. I was like, I'm not gonna pay for an album, especially from like the 70s, late 70s, like that much, man. And I know that they re-released it, but still, like, come on. Okay, so right after Physical Graffiti, they're about to go on another world tour, and stuff like that. And what had happened was Robert Plant got in like a major car accident while he was vacationing with his wife. So they had to scrap the tour, and Robert was like in a wheelchair for a while and things like that. And with Robert, for some odd reason, like with Robert being injured and everything like that, the band wanted to do a new album. And it was kind of like, And Robert was kind of iffy about it because he just wanted to rest. Like, he basically just wanted to rest, get his health back together, and whatnot. So they were recording it while he was in a wheelchair. And what's interesting is like the studio was like a very small studio and things of that nature. And at that same time, the Rolling Stones were working on their album Black and Blue, which would have released that same year. And yeah, to be honest, like it only took Jimmy Page like 18 days to finish the album, basically. So like this was like, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think this album and their first album was like the quickest albums they've ever done. But at the same time, Robert felt like he didn't put that much effort in the album because his voice was suffered from the car accident, and over the years, because over the years, like he likes to smoke cigarettes, and I think a lot of people think that also had a tone in his voice too, basically. So he wanted to be with his wife around that time, and another thing too, like they were going through, I think he was going through some tax problems too, and they finished this album basically. Now I'm gonna get into my thoughts about this album, but let me just say something first. These last two Led Zeppelin albums, I'm sorry. These last two Led Zeppelin albums, they always have a mixed reaction from fans. I've noticed that. Hold on one second. They've always had a mixed reaction with fans, basically. And it's crazy because, okay, we can all agree that every album they've done up to Physical Graffiti is a bona fide classic. If not a classic, a very good album. And things of that nature. And also, with the last two, they were doing like a lot of experimentation. Well, not like a lot of experimentation, which I will get into in a moment. I will get into that in a moment and stuff like that. Because, whew, I might be surprised with some of my reaction to some of these albums, but here it is what it is. Okay, so the 7 songs, y'all know what I'm about to do. First song is Achel's Last Stand. In my opinion, my favorite song off this album. And this was a song that I don't hear like a lot of Led Zeppelin fans talk about, basically. So basically, this song is like one of the longest songs. I think it clocks in about 10 minutes and something seconds. It starts off like this like dreamy, like atmospheric intro that Page has done. And next thing you know, it just has this fast-paced, aggressive side to it and shit like that. Originally, it was supposed to be called the Wheelchair Song, but they changed it. I'm glad they did, because I don't think anybody really listen to a song that's called a Wheelchair Song. And so, basically, the song's about Robert Plant's experiences in Morocco during like the Earl Court concerts and shit like that. And yeah, very dope song. This song has actually kind of grew on me a little bit. I mean, it's a bit too long, I admit, but it kind of grew on me. Like, it had like a more aggressive sound from them. And a lot of people have said that it kind of influenced like the British heavy metal that will come later on, like in the following decade, you know, with Iron Maiden and things of that nature. So yeah, Achel's Last Stand, dope song, one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs. Then we have For Your Life. Jesus, damn. For Your Life is the next song. It was written by Plant and stuff like that. This is like a more laid back song, basically. What the song is about is like, what's the song about? It's just talking about this girl who is on drugs and stuff like that in the LA drug scene, and basically it's just like she's her life and just kind of like around that grain, like talking about this girl in the LA drug scene and shit like that, basically. Not one of my favorites, but still a cool song. Then we have Royal Orleans. Now this is a funny song, has an interesting backstory towards it. So the song takes place in the early 1970s, and it's about John Paul Jones, the bassist. He bought this girl from the bar and shit like that, but he did not know that the girl was a transvestite, basically. So they were both like, chilling, both smoking weed and stuff like that. And once they fell asleep, the transvestite wanted to smoke again, so she lit the blunt up in his hand. Whole room caught fire, but everyone survived and shit like that. I thought it was a pretty funny song, nice little fast-paced kind of song, and it just adds to like Led Zeppelin's reputation for their debauchery, their wild stories and stuff like that. Very dope song right there. Underrated. Nobody's Fault But Mine is the next song. Probably one of the most darkest songs in the discography, because it talks about Robert Plant. The song talking about how Robert Plant was basically how can I put this? It's like the bad things that happened to him, the car crash, and he felt like it was his fault. For that, it was his fault. You know how you get in. Damn, hold up. What was I about to say? Like, you know how you just start rethinking your life and shit like that. So that's basically what I got from that song. Nobody's Fault But Mine. But like, it's a gospel. They kind of reworked it because it was like an old gospel song that's been recorded over the years by many musicians, most notably by Blind Willie Johnson. Another thing too I liked was Robert played harmonica on that song. And shit like that. And Jimmy Page gave out one of his best guitar solos ever, basically. So, still a dope song. Yeah, probably my second favorite song off this album. Then we have Candy Store Rock, which is basically, it has like a rockabilly sound, kind of like an Elvis, Buddy Holly kind of sound and shit like that. No, I didn't really like that song, to be honest with you. I could have done without that song. Then we have Hats On For Nowhere. Hot Song For Nowhere, excuse me. Which was a very interesting track where Robert was like venting like his frustrations out about Jimmy Page and their manager Peter Grant about him not, resting, like him, they're rushing the album and stuff like that. Pretty dope song. It has like a very funky rhythm to it. Another thing too about that song, like you can feel Robert's aggression with that, Very underrated song. And the last song off this album, T For One, which was the second longest song off this album, just deals with like being lonely and things like that, like homesickness, which is a very nice way to end the album. The blues structure, you can tell like they were influenced by like Since I've Been Loving You or Led Zeppelin 3. Dope album, by the way. So yeah, very good album, very good song. And that's all the time I have for this album. My personal opinion, when I first heard this album, I have to admit to you, I thought it was okay. I thought it could have been a little bit better. For one, I felt like, of course, the album was rushed, so I was kind of like iffy about this album for a while because there was not really that much bluesy songs on this album like that. Like, a lot of it was just more fast-paced, aggressive rock, which I don't mind that from Led Zeppelin because they've done stuff like that, but at least there were like a couple of bluesy songs there. And another thing I felt was, this is the main problem I have with this album, was Robert Plant. Now, don't get me wrong, Robert Plant, definitely one of my favorite rock singers, one of my favorite frontman, but you can tell like his whole heart was not really in this album like that. Like, what the fuck? I'm sorry. You can tell like this whole heart was not really in this album. You can tell like, cause like usually when I listen to a Led Zeppelin album, I always love when Robert Plant, cause it's like his voice takes you through like a journey, like a mystical journey. Especially like if you listen to Stairway to Heaven, The Rain Song, The Ocean, Whole Lot of Love, Since I've Been Loving You. But with like this album, like you can tell like he just didn't want to do this album. You can tell it from his voice. I'm sorry, somebody's going in and out, in and out. I just don't like that. So that's my main gripes about this album. But I've been re-listening to this album like these last two albums and stuff like that. And I've got to admit, this album was heavily slept on, though. No, it's not like Physical Graffiti or House of the Holy, but it's like a more aggressive, a more dirty, I wouldn't say like dirty, but it was like more like hard hitting and shit like that, basically. Because at that time, when the last two Led Zeppelin albums were released, and I'm going to do In Through the Outdoor probably later on this week or sometime. When the last two Led Zeppelin albums was released, it did not get that much praise and stuff like that because, yeah, it did go #1 in like the pop albums chart, but like a lot of critics, a lot of long-time fans were kind of like iffy about those albums and shit like that. But over the years, like the critical views have like gone over the years and stuff like that. And I would say this. I feel like this album was Jimmy Page's best work, best single album for Led Zeppelin, if I would say that. Because, like, his guitar work was just so dope on this album. Like, his guitar work was so dope on this album. Production-wise, it's still a good album. But it's not touching, like, the other Led Zeppelin albums, like. And one thing for sure, I do like this album more than In Through the Outdoor, which I would review that album. But whenever you think about Led Zeppelin, you guys think like they were very consistent and stuff like that. And when people talk about their post-Physical Graffiti, it always divides fans a lot. Yes, it's not as good as their earlier works, but you gotta give them credit for actually sticking to their guns and everything like that. And when one talks about Led Zeppelin, like the decline in popularity, it's people make it out seem like, oh well, after Physical Graffiti they didn't release another good album. Just think of it this way. Think of the consistency between Physical Graffiti's presence. Think of when Talking Heads released Stop Making, what's the album? Little Creatures after the Speaking in Tongues album, which both albums, which Little Creatures was a good album, but it wasn't that great. I mean, it was a good album, but it wasn't great. Then don't think of like when the Rolling Stones released Goat's Head Soup after Exile. Then stay tuned for that one, because I have a lot to say about those two albums. But other than that, I still would recommend the album. Like, I recommend all Led Zeppelin albums and shit like that. But if you want like their bluesy or like their more harder songs, if they're bluesy songs, don't expect a lot from this album. That's all I'm gonna say. But thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more. Peace.